Good evening. Can you hear me? A little louder then. Is that better? Thank you. I'd like to thank everyone for coming to this dinner, and I'd like to tell you how this all happened. Tom asked if I would be interested in making a few remarks at the dinner, and I said, well, okay. And then he said, and do it in 5 minutes. I'm a lawyer. Nothing occurs in 5 minutes. And you may have noticed that I was sort of moving slowly as I came up. In January, I had back surgery at Stanford Hospital to repair one of my ruptured discs. And my wife, Sally, is not with me, which means I can talk about her a lot. But her comment was, finally someone's cutting you down to size. That's what I get for marrying the only daughter of a Pittsburgh ironworker. In any event, I will try to keep this within 5 minutes. When asked to do this, I was asked, what is it that Geneva means to me? And I looked at Scripture and decided that I would follow it in this way. And I will be reading some things because I want to get it right. If someone asked you to go 1 mile, go with them 2 miles, from Matthew. And that's what I think of when I remember the faculty members and the teachers that I had here at Geneva. They always seemed to go more than was needed for the students that were here. I came off a farm near Penn State, and no one in my family ever finished high school. And the sort of things that we had were the Bookies Club with Norman Carson, Ann Payton, David Carson, Margaret Cometto. 4 or 6 months during the school year, we'd be given a book to read and then have a delightful time, usually at Ferncliff, discussing this. And it helped me understand and appreciate the power of the written and spoken word. Very important. Some other people's ears who will burn will be later on. This Bookies was really a good program, and in fact, when I got a book signed by David Carson, the only thing he wrote was, "Hello, Howard, remember the Bookies." So it does happen. My wife Sally was one part of the program later on, and she also had what she would consider special treatment. The second thing has to do, and this is what I'll be reading. I have a chemistry background from Geneva and then did graduate work at Stanford. And through a series of events, I ended up on the board of the National American Chemical Society, which is the largest scientific society in the world. And in that capacity, I had the opportunity to write 2 comments a year in the national magazine that went to 160,000 chemists. And I chose to write on mentorship. So this can be found in 2005. Mentoring puts a human face on chemistry, yours. I know mentoring works by word and by deed. My wife Sally and I met in a chemistry lab in our small Christian college. I was the first in my family to finish high school. We had no family or friends that were practicing chemists, but we did have the same professors, college chemistry teachers, who knew and practiced mentoring. Our physical chemistry professor, Charles Fugit, drove us aspiring chemists to various meetings. I don't know if he was ever reimbursed for that. Our inorganic chemistry professor, Roy Adams, didn't need to talk about doing a good ethical job, he just did it. And my organic chemistry prof allowed me to do research with him, and I now have a copy of the letter he wrote to Stanford 50 years ago that I'm sure got me in. I'm convinced that all of these things are important because that letter was to a teacher of his at Penn State from the 40s who was now at Stanford, and I eventually finished my PhD under him. So you begin to see how all these things begin to weave together. Geneva College is an institution of higher learning, and the only one in the entire country to contribute to a scholars program for underrepresented minorities in chemistry. And in 2005, Geneva itself had its first ACS scholar. And as I remember, over the years, they contributed more funds than as did the Ford Motor Company. The second thing has to do with my wife. And as I said, we met in a chem lab here. And earlier in the year, there was something provided where we could take and write about meeting your spouse and another Geneva graduate. And I put down something and sent it in, and they accepted it. So this will take just a minute, and I will then be finishing up. It's been over 50 years, and this is on the Geneva web. But I can still smell those old chemistry labs at Geneva College. Sally Ann Brown, yes, the one with the flashing dark eyes and bouncy curly hair, was a class cut-up. She could give as well as take it. She caught her hair on fire that first year in the Bunsen burner, and her lab mates had to put it out in the sink. Later, they put hydrochloric acid in one lab bench and ammonia in the next, and when she came in, there was a thin film of ammonium chloride over everything she had to clean. She certainly learned the joys of ammonium triiodide, which if you simply take ammonia, put iodine in it, and let it evaporate, it becomes a mild explosive. When Professor Puget heard another crash from the PChem lab, it's reported he just buried his head in his hands and said, "What has she done now?" In those quaint times in the last century, Geneva didn't have drinking, smoking, or dancing. And they still don't. It's nice when some things remain the same. Her research was such that she did some work on the dropping mercury electrode, which in chemistry is called polarography. But usually when she got to do a seminar, Sally Brown was talking on dropping mercury electrode polarography, some wag in the chemistry department would change that to pornography. It got changed back very quickly. There is an urban legend that the only reason that she passed physical chemistry was because she agreed that she would never practice lab chemistry. Now, Dr. Fugit now lives 10 miles away from us in California. We've had lunch with him several times, and he's still going strong, over 80. So I asked him about this, and he said, "Well, that's absurd. We would never do anything like that." And then he winked. Spring Formal was the dinner dance in 1962. It was supposed to be Duke Ellington, but I was there, and he got sick, but we had Duke Ellington's band. Sally was working, and I was working on finishing my last project, and by that time I'd accepted the opportunity to go to Stanford. And we went to that Spring Formal. It was our first date and last date on campus. Now, we had a great time. We can't remember who replaced the Duke. And it had been a magical evening. She had white gloves and a hat and all the rest of the things that occurred 50 years ago. And the evening moved quickly. And as I delivered her back to McKee Hall, inside the time for curfew, I was saying something like, "Just where have you been all my life?" And I got the most startled look from Miss Brown. What I didn't understand was God's plan was at work. The next morning, I found one of her white gloves in my car. So yes, it was the old white glove trick. But how was I to know? I returned the glove to her at McKee in the lobby saying, "This is beginning to feel like a B-grade romance movie." And she just smiled and said, "You never know." That summer I was a lab rat at Gulf Oil in Harmerville, and she lived an hour away. During that courtship summer, we found out we had a number of things in common, including the fact that her father was Elmer Ellsworth Brown, and my father, grandfather, and brother were Elmer Ellsworth Peters. Go figure that, it doesn't roll off the tongue. I proposed within 10 weeks, to the consternation of her parents. After a 2-year long-distance romance, we got married shortly after she graduated in McKeesport, and several of the people in this room came to that wedding, as did most of the chemistry department here at Geneva College. So, many years later, we've had our usual ups and downs, 2 daughters, 2 granddaughters, but I can't remember ever being single. And I can't remember what my life would be without it. So I guess the upshot of all this is, what do I remember about Geneva? And what do I owe Geneva? I think the word everything covers it. It's been a special time and a special part of my life. And the last thing that I was talking about, one last page here. Yes, what's the challenge now at 70? And I think it would come from Micah. He has told you, I read this, old man rather than oh man. What is good? What does the Lord require of you? But to do justice, to love kindness, and walk humbly with your God. Thank you.
And thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk to you folks. This is just a wonderful honor. Whenever I was asked to give this, he also told me to keep it within 5 minutes. And I'm a communication major. So I've been studying how to communicate with people at this institution for the last 4 years. But nonetheless, I'll try to keep it at 5 minutes. And the question posed to me was also, what does Geneva mean to you? The best way to go into this subject is to talk about where Geneva met me in my life at that point as an 18-year-old high school graduate. My decision to come to Geneva, well, first I'll mention my mother's a Geneva alumni, and my sister is also a graduate. And my reasons for coming to Geneva were much less righteous than their reasons. At that point, I was a rather rebellious pastor's son. We all know them. And I wasn't really concerned with coming to Geneva as a place to come and be discipled and be nurtured spiritually and to be prepared for a career. I was more interested in coming to Geneva because if I were to come to Geneva, a Christian college, then maybe my parents would stay off of my back and not breathe down my neck, and I could do what I want, while I'm here, And so the Lord has different plans for that. So a couple months before I came to the college, actually, I had a very intense experience in my heart. A deep, pungent conviction took hold of my heart that summer before I came to Geneva College. And I encountered a lot of the sin that I've been dabbling in and a lot of double-mindedness and hypocrisy, and that, is this better? And that experience of dealing with my sin kind of left me at a very sensitive place. I had a lot of questions like, would the Lord forgive me? Is there forgiveness for me? I've been such a hypocrite. My parents have raised me well, and I'm at this place, and I'm about to go to Geneva, and I was just at a very sensitive place before coming to this college. And Actually, during that time, I even went into a little bit of a depressed state. You know, my family was very worried about me coming to college because I was going time where I was having trouble sleeping and things like that, and they were really worried about me going away to college. When I got to college, it was my first week here at Geneva, and into my room walked someone named Ted Northrope. I don't know if any of you know him or recognize the name, but Ted Northrope was my discipleship coordinator. And Ted offered to pray with me. And he said he was walking through the building asking anyone who wanted him to sit down and pray with them to pray. And he offered that to me, and I was in a position where I was ready to have someone that would sit down and pray with me. And that's kind of how my experience at Geneva got kicked off. And it was just a wonderful start. And I went on from then into my classes, and I got to build some relationship with my professors, and I talked to them about my story, and it was Dr. Byron Curtis who actually shared the gospel with me in a wonderful and beautiful way. And many professors actually, Professor Dr. Watt and Dr. Curtis and Dr. Dean Smith, all at different times sat down and prayed with me about questions that I had about Scripture and about my spiritual life. And so now, as I'm graduating, I look back and I think, what if I'd gone somewhere else for college? What if I'd gone somewhere else where I wouldn't have had a discipleship coordinator to step into my room and to ask to pray with me, or to have professors who were willing to have their doors open for me to come and talk with them about these questions? And a scripture comes to mind. This is from 2 Samuel 22, starting at verse 18. David says, "He rescued me from my powerful enemy, from my foes who were too strong for me. They confronted me in my day of disaster, but the Lord was my support. He brought me out into a spacious place. He rescued me because he delighted in me." And for me, what does Geneva College mean to me? Geneva College was my spacious place. Geneva College met me at a very sensitive place in my spiritual walk, and I started off well, and within 2 months of coming to Geneva, I'd become class president. I was a freshman homecoming prince. I just never stepped into a community where I was so quickly and easily loved and just shown grace right off the bat from everyone that I encountered. Since coming to Geneva, I've served as a discipleship coordinator myself, and as a program coordinator for the Center for Faith and Practice, as a public relations intern, a rugby player, a writer for the cabinet, Bible study leader. And I can honestly say that Geneva has truly, truly discipled me and taken me to a new place where if you would have met me that summer before coming to Geneva, you wouldn't be sure that I had the capacity to go to those places. And I also met my lifelong friends here, one of which is going to be my future wife, and I'll be getting married May 18th. And you can say what you want about the ring by spring thing, but Geneva College isn't a bad place to find a wife, right, Mr. Pierce? So my prayer is that I come back here in 50 years and I can tell all of the folks about how I met her. I'll save that story for then because it's not over yet. And I just couldn't be more thankful. And I couldn't be more proud of my college. I really couldn't. Particularly seeing the stand that the college is taking with the federal lawsuit against the government and standing by those principles. As a young man, it's not an easy world to look out into and to take a stand for what you think your principles are, and to have someone setting that example for me is a big thing. It's a real big thing, and it's a statement. I am one of the few and the proud employed graduating from college. And just what a wonderful network Geneva College has provided me from that. I'm affiliated with a program that has connections right here at Geneva, the Pittsburgh Fellows Program. And I will be starting at a company called PGT, Pat Gallagher Trucking. And I'm excited to start that career and to get out into the world and to start doing all the things that I've been trained so long to do. And I'm sure as I go into that, I'll be gaining more perspective of why I learned the things I did and had the experiences that I had. And I'm excited to see that all go down. So thank you all very much for all that you do for Geneva, and thank you for making truly an eternal difference in my life. And I know that it's happening in many other students. I know that I'm not the only one. I know that there's other students with similar testimonies as I. So, thank you.
Each year, the Recognition Committee of the Geneva College Alumni Council makes recommendations of individuals who are deemed worthy and appropriate Life G Award recipients to the leadership of Geneva College. Alumni who have previously been awarded the Distinguished Service Award are the only eligible persons who can receive the Life G. The committee considers life accomplishments and character that exemplify a clearly demonstrated walk with Jesus Christ. We also look at professional information and accomplishments, education, church affiliation, and involvement, service to country, including civic and community activities, and loyalty and service to Geneva. The Life G is Geneva's highest alumni honor, and its awarding dates back into the 1930s. The Life G is presented each year to a graduate for service above self who embodies the principles for which Geneva College stands and whose efforts on behalf of the college, the community, and the nation have been exemplary. The award is also a means of honoring alumni for exemplifying Geneva's standards, mission, and commitment to servant leadership. This year's Life G recipient is Dr. Roy Blackwood, class of 1948, and a Distinguished Service recipient from 1981. And here to share about Dr. Blackwood is Geneva's president, Dr. Ken Smith.
Well, this is an honor. I have known Dr. Blackwood for a long time. Dr. Roy Blackwood was born in 1925 and raised in New Concord, Ohio. He attended Muskingum College, then enlisted in the United States Navy in 1942. During the Second World War, he served in the Pacific and Atlantic theaters aboard the USS Petroff Bay as a navigator and division officer. After his discharge in 1946, he attended Geneva College and graduated in 1948 with a Bachelor of Science in, Howard, chemistry. Now my father, the Reverend Kenneth G. Smith, class of 1949, developed a deep and lasting friendship with Roy while they were students together. Dad remembers Roy as a cheerleader who, with Willard McMillan, put on skits during chapel, no less, to drum up support for upcoming football games. Roy was also the manager for the first tour of the Covey Chords, a men's quartet who traveled and represented the college much like New Song does now, which my father sang. Now, as this presentation is to honor Dr. Blackwood rather than roast him, I will refrain from telling any of the many Roy Blackwood stories I heard from my dad as I grew up. Dr. Blackwood received his Master of Divinity degree from the Reformed Presbyterian Theological Seminary in 1951 and earned his PhD in History, Theology, and Political Science from the University of Edinburgh in 1963. He was ordained in the Reformed Presbyterian Church of North America in 1951, and he ministered in Bloomington, Indiana, and then as pastor of the Second Reformed Presbyterian Church of Indianapolis from 1964 to 2009. He was involved in several church plants around Indiana, including Indianapolis, West Lafayette, Muncie, and Columbus, and he periodically taught church history and the history of music. During his pastoral ministry, Dr. Blackwood also served as a lecturer and counselor for members of the Indiana state government, a lecturer for the Thomas F. Staley Foundation, a coordinator and board member for the Institute in Basic Life Principles, a board member for the Indiana Biblical Counseling Center, a member of the American Scientific Affiliation, a member of the Council to the Constitutional Revision Committee in Russia, and a member of the Foundations Committee for Heritage Christian School. He participated in missions trips and lectures in Scotland, Ireland, Cyprus, Lebanon, Japan, Singapore, Malaysia, India, and Australia. And in 2009, Roy and Dr. Michael Lefebvre published William Symington, penman of the Scottish Covenanters. And with all of these other commitments, Dr. Blackwood found time to offer his gifts and graces to Geneva College. He was a member of the Board of Trustees from 1965 to 1996, serving on the Spiritual Resources Committee and the Education Committee. And when I joined the board as a trustee in 1994, Roy welcomed me warmly and helped me orient to the requirements of effective boardsmanship. Roy also served as a member of Geneva's Board of Corporators. He was given the Distinguished Service Award by Geneva College in 1981 and the Faithful Servant Award by the Reformed Presbyterian Theological Seminary in 2009. Now, Roy married his college sweetheart, Margaret Graham, in 1948. And Roy and Margie were married for almost 63 years until she went to be with the Lord this past November. And they raised 3 children, Bill, Beth, and Bob, all of whom I've known for many years, all of whom are here tonight. Now, Dr. Blackwood was a close friend of the late Leroy Imes of the Navigators, who held a Doctor of Divinity degree from Geneva. And Leroy wrote a book entitled The Lost Art of Discipleship. And in that book, he said this about Dr. Blackwood. He, Roy, did not want to be just a Bible teacher to a group of spiritually hungry souls who would get their only ration of spiritual food once a week from his sermons. He wanted to train a band of strong, rugged soldiers of the cross who would then collaborate with him in the work of the ministry of the church. Some years have now passed, and his ministry has proved to be one of the unique expressions of discipleship in our day. It is in recognition of this commitment to Christ and His kingdom, and in thanks to God for Dr. Blackwood's years of faithful and fruitful service to Geneva College, the church, and the world, pro Christo et Patria, that we honor Dr. Blackwood tonight with the Life G. Roy, would you please stand?
Thank you all. Thank you all.